even offers of leniency that are given to you if it means compromising on something that's crucial. I want to talk now about one example. I was going to talk about two, but I don't think I'll have time. And the second one's super controversial. So I won't get into it. Right? Where will American Muslims stand on the apartheid of our time? You'd think this would be pretty clear for Muslims, isn't it? You know, because the Masjid al-Aqsa is mentioned in the Quran, and because of our fellow Muslims who are living under occupation of the apartheid system of the Israeli state. But it's not clear at all to American Muslims, apparently. Where will Muslims stand on this issue? I want to be clear. Not everybody has to go and fight every fight. If you don't want to deal with the Israel-Palestine issue, that's fine. It's a tough issue to deal with in this country. It's very controversial. You're not required to. But just like those South African Muslims who had the temptation to go and join in the tricameral parliament, if you don't want to participate in the apartheid regime, that's fine. You want to sit and, drink tea and do whatever, no big deal. You don't have to go out in the streets and riot. You don't have to go out in the streets with a sign and protest. But don't help out the oppressors. There's a big difference between not doing anything and helping out those who oppress. And I am amazed Muslims in this country can't see the difference between these things. There's a movement called Boycott, Divest, Sanction Movement, BDS. Started in 2005 by Palestinian civil society. Over 200 Palestinian civil society organizations, politicians, artists, trade deals, everything have signed on to this, saying we want people in other countries to boycott goods produced in Israel, and certainly those produced in the occupied territories. We want people to engage in academic boycott of Israeli institutions. This doesn't mean you can't go to Masjid al-Aqsa. You can go to Masjid al-Aqsa right now and go and visit. This is not an official. You're not going and working with an institution. But if you get invited by, let's say, an Israeli university to do that, you couldn't do that. So this is not unreasonable. It's saying this is based on the boycott and sanctions that were called for of apartheid South Africa starting in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And this movement has become very successful now. This is actually one of the most read articles in the Washington Post in the last year. This is just a couple months ago. Two professors, I think one is at Harvard, one is at MIT. They're Jewish American professors, and they wrote this: "We're lifelong Zionists. Here's why we chose to boycott Israel." So you have people who are Jewish, who are lifelong Zionists, who are saying the Israeli government's policies are so despicable, so cruel, so discriminatory, so apartheid, that we have to boycott them. And then just look at this deal. This is I counted them. In the last couple of years, there's 7 standalone articles in The Economist on the BDS movement. The campaign is getting where Israeli politicians sound rattled by the campaign that isolated their country. Where are American Muslims going to stand on this? I don't want to talk about this issue. Right? Where are American Muslims going to stand on this? And I hope that my host of Gustavo won't get upset. But there are lots of Muslims in this country who accepted invitations by an organization or an initiative called the Muslim Leadership Initiative, which was funded by the Shalom Hartman Institute, a very conservative Israeli organization, which supported the war in Gaza, whose spokespeople wrote in support of the Israeli military's butchering of thousands of Palestinian civilians, Muslim civilians. This organization, in cooperation with an imam, American Muslim imam, Abdullah Taqi, from Duke University, to take young American Muslims on the tab of this Shalom Hartman Institute to go to Israel to learn about Zionism and Judaism. I would love to learn about Judaism. I read books all the time on Judaism. I would love to learn about Zionism. I have no problem. There's no problem with speaking to people from other religions. There's no problem with learning about their religions. There's no problem with speaking to people who have other political views. You can sit down, tea with them. Maybe you'll come to an understanding. That's wonderful. I've never heard a Muslim ever object to that. And so when people who defend this program make that excuse, I think they must have had some kind of zinc deficiency when they were growing up, because that's not what we're talking about. When I talked to one of the organizers of this program, and I said, why? You can do all these things. Why don't you just do it in New York City? Why don't you do it in Washington? Just synagogues all over this country. Jewish communities would be happy to teach you about Judaism and Zionism. Why do you go to Israel? Violating the BDS boycott. And the person who was one of the organizers, I won't name their name, said to me, well, we suggested that, but Shalom Hartman didn't want that. They insisted it was in the film. Really? That surprised me. And there's a very good article by a journalist called Sana Saeed who exposed this and showed that the Shalom Hartman Institute was advertising this Muslim leadership initiative as part of their anti-BDS work. Now, again, you don't have to boycott. If you don't want to boycott stuff, that's fine. But there's all these the Presbyterian Church, part of the United Churches of Christ, the Quaker Church organizations in this country, Jewish Voices for Peace, people like Stephen Hawking. Over 364 last year, about 360 British academics in October wrote an open letter in the Guardian newspaper saying we're going to boycott Israel because of their discriminatory policies towards the Palestinians. There's all these non-Muslims who are standing up against what's happening to other Muslims in Palestine. And who's undermining their efforts? Young Muslims in this country who go there. I can't imagine that. Right? Think about, I told you this offer before. It was the same offer that was made to the Indians, the Muslim community, the Muslim Indian community in South Africa by the apartheid government. We'll treat you well. You'll have a seat at the table. Just join us. Legitimize us. The answer was no. And that is why Muslims are respected in South Africa today. That's why there's a Muslim ambassador to America. Ibrahim Rasool was in prison during the apartheid period for his work. Because when you stand up for truth, sooner or later, you'll come out on top. Sooner or later, in a society that values truth and justice, you will be safe. But if you cave in because you get free trips, because you get free food, because you get little pats on the back here and there, or legs up here and there, you will compromise something much more important, which is your commitment to justice. And the commitment of justice of all these other people who are not Muslim. And then they look at Muslims and they say, look at these young Muslims. Look how superficial their thinking is. Anyway, sorry to be so insistent on this point, but I think it's very important that Muslims think about this, because we are on many issues in this country. We have choices ahead of us. Do we support African Americans who are out there protesting against police violence? Or do we say, you know what? My life's pretty good. Nothing's going to happen to my kids. They're not die. Okay? Do we forget about the Muslims whose children have been targeted by Asian provocateurs, by informants? There's two different This American Life Story episodes, if you want to listen to this, on NPR. One called The Convert, the other one about this guy in Pittsburgh, I can't remember it. Two different This American Life episodes about Muslims who get targeted by informants. Then the Muslims turn in the informant, and the Muslims get punished for turning in the informant. Because the informant's coming in the mosque and saying jihad, jihad, jihad. They turn him in and they get in trouble. What about the Muslims who were put in prison? Even, let's say they did something wrong, what about their families? Families are devastated. Do we turn our back on their families? Are we afraid to help them and to be seen with them because we're afraid we're going to think that we're sympathizing with them? No guilt by association, people. You don't turn your back on people just because they're in trouble. There's all these choices we American Muslims have, and American Muslims, especially the community, have a very nice ride right now. They can keep going on that ride and be part of all the problems around them, or they can take stances on issues that everybody in our country knows are important. Justice, race issues, American foreign policy issues. And when two lifelong committed Zionists write an article in the Washington Post saying, we're supporting Israeli boycott of Israel, let me tell you what's going to happen. Everybody knows this. Eventually, Israel is going to become more and more internationally isolated, and instead of being the cool thing to do to support Israel and go to Israel, it's going to be cool to be pro-BDS. And guess who's going to be the losers on those days? The Muslims in this country who turn their back on this cause of justice. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakumullah khair for the support of the day. We'd like to thank our guest speakers tonight, Mufti Muhammad Wasim Khan and Dr. Winston Brown. Do not forget tomorrow, inshallah, we'll have more of this. Inshallah, we'll have Islam of the South Asia and its legacy. And I think, unfortunately, it's almost 10 o'clock, the masjid is really closed. I think we will not have time for question and answer tonight, but come tomorrow. We'll have
I have lots of pictures tomorrow.
Yes. So inshallah, to be very informative session, 2 o'clock, inshallah, at the same place. And do not forget our next program next month, March 4th and 5th. We will host Hisham Mahmoud for work.